Welcome to St Paul's Church, Staverton, my home, and to our video podcast. I'm not quite sure if that's the right title or not, but
not really.
It'll do. But also our guests today, Simon Lole and Dr. Barry Rose. It's very good to have you both with us. And I wondered whether a good start might be for us to talk about the early days of our career and how we got into church music. I don't know. Barry, do you want to kick off with?
Well, I'm the one who came on the unconventional route, of course. So I should be listening to you, who came via the conventional way.
You think?
Yeah. Where do you begin? I mean, you both. We start with piano lessons. Mine was with a little local lady, who taught me little pieces, and I was a terrible pianist. I mean, I still am a terrible pianist, I think. But I played at the local Sunday school. That's where it all began for me, playing hymns from Golden Bells.
Golden Bells?
Golden Bells, which was a hymnal which was around in the 1940s, I should think. It had traditional hymns in it as well, so Jesus bids us shine with a pure...
Oh, I remember that one.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me the stories of Jesus.
Can't go wrong there.
All those we sang, and I got into playing at actually I didn't get in initially because I went to Sunday school, but my eye was caught by a very pretty girl who played the piano. She was a very pretty girl, and so very young, you think, oh, lovely. And I took over from her in the end. She didn't actually play the same thing.
We didn't start doing duets or anything.
No. And it was while I was playing there that a local curate came along and said, well, could you play the harmonium for me in my mission church?
Oh, right.
Which was down the road, about a mile and a half down the road. So there I played for 6, 7, 8 years, something like that, I think. Sunday by Sunday. It's where you learn to play hymns, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
The way you play a hymn over, I mean, I don't need to tell you to, but it's the way you play a hymn over that decides whether people are going to sing it or not, don't
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's not just the tune.
It's a great skill.
But then, playing there, my mother paid for me, my mother and father paid for me to have a few organ lessons at the local church.
Right.
The problem with that is, after school, I had to take the bus home from school, 4:30 in a dark church. They were open, of course, all churches were open.
Yeah.
You're on your own, just sitting at the console, and there's creaks going on everywhere. It's a slightly frightening thing. And I sort of learned a few pieces, and I was taught really properly on the organ.
Whereabouts?
Chingford Parish Church.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes, on the green there. Yeah. And I went on from there, really, and played a few services at that church. I mean, if the organist was away, he'd say, could you play this wedding? So that was my very first experience of playing properly. Yeah. But it was all pie in the sky, really, because I wasn't very good academically at school. Well, I was all right, but in those days it was a general school certificate. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
No,
I don't remember it. I know of it, yeah.
And you had to pass a certain number with passes or credits or distinctions. And if you got a certain number of distinctions, you went on to what they call matriculation. And you could go on to university, but I didn't make that grade. So I left school at 16.
Did you?
Yeah, I left school at 16. And you know what parents are, get yourself a proper job.
Yeah.
So my dad get a real proper job. Like working in a bank or working in insurance or something.
Is that where you worked in insurance? That was when you were early.
So I started off working in insurance. It wasn't actually an insurance firm. It was in a place called Portugal Street in London, which was the head office of W.H. Smith and Son, the booksellers, and they had an insurance department. So I went in there as a very junior person, making the tea, that sort of thing, and running errands.
Yeah.
And it was while I was there that I met a guy who was an organist at St Martin in the Fields. He was only an assistant organist. And did you know that every night at St Martin in the Fields in those days, they had a 6 o'clock service?
Really?
Where for the people going home, it was very short. Some prayers, a reading, a hymn. Yeah. And would I like to play the hymn?
Oh.
So I started my career really playing the
St Martin in the Fields.
evening service on a Spurden Rut console.
Was that up in the gallery?
Up in the gallery,
With
yes.
lots of
Yes,
lights.
lots of lights.
I remember it. Yeah.
And I think the foundation stops had yellow lights, didn't they?
That's
and
right.
the couplers had green lights,
Yes.
and I think the reeds were red lights. So it looked like Southend Pier, you know. when it operates.
And if the bulbs are gone, you hadn't got a clue
So
whether
you
the
haven't got a
stops
clue
were
whether
on
you
or
have
not.
got a tuber or not.
But you didn't care.
No, I didn't. And of course, it gave me a chance to play properly, so
Yeah,
to speak, in a proper church.
Did people sing?
Yeah, yes, they all sang the hymn. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it was a big congregation
Oh, right.
each evening.
Oh, right.
Just a home-going thing.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Well, I mean, they were the days when people went to church, were they not?
Oh, careful.
And then, of course, I met somebody in the locality, you know, who said, "Well, you're never going to be an organist." You know, we by the way, we moved into a new church. My mission church built a brick church next door. So I graduated from the harmonium to a Compton electrone.
Right.
Do you know what a Compton electrone is?
Not really.
Compton, this is the first of the pipeless organs.
Yeah.
And it had a tone wheels which went round and round and created the sound. It's a bit like a big refrigerator, and it was put in the clergy vestry. It was a 2-manual,
Right.
and it wasn't bad. It was the only thing they could have.
Yeah.
So I graduated there. But I was still working in the insurance office, and this friend said to me, "Look," he said, "if you want to do anything in music, you've got to sing. You've got to go and be a singer somehow." And I said, "Well, I don't sing." He said, "Well, I do. I sing in the choir of Hampstead Parish Church. Why don't you come round to my house?" I don't really know much about Hampstead Parish Church in the 50s. Do you know anything about Hampstead?
Well, I know that.
I knew it in the 70s, but
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know about the 50s. I mean, I know it had a very good musical tradition, but maybe that was a bit later on. But that was clearly when you started.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
No, Martindale Sidwell.
Martin Sidwell had come from a church. He'd been assistant organist at Wells, hadn't he?
He had, that's
before the
right,
war.
yeah.
Oh, right.
And he done national service, I think, or wartime service, and went to Holy Trinity Leamington, or one of those big churches
gosh.
in Leamington Spa.
Yes, that's right.
And
Holy
then
Trinity, probably,
came
yeah.
to Hampstead, I think, the late 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And created this amazing choir, you know,
Yeah.
which was the choir.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me.
broadcasting,
Yeah.
films,
Yeah.
concerts.
And this was
tours.
boys and men.
Boys and men. Boys educated at University College School on scholarships.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. So
they sang on the Klemperer recording of the Matthew Passion.
That's right.
They
They
did
did, yes.
the Ripieno.
I mean, it was a choir I admired, and I first heard them on a parlophone label,
Yeah.
which was a carol sung by Sebastian Forbes, who was one of their choristers. And I thought, this is an amazing choir.
Yeah.
But I never dreamed I'd be in it. But this friend said, "Well, I'll give you a few singing lessons, and then come along and do an audition." I wrote to Martindale Sidwell, and he wrote back the same day and said, "Come tomorrow." And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Have you ever done a singing, apart from the one you're going to tell us about later, your chorister audition? Have you ever done one since?
I have actually once where I wanted to have singing lessons with David Lowe. So I did an audition. I was absolutely terrified.
Yeah, I was so petrified.
Yeah.
Now, shaking, I virtually tore the copy in half and put it back on the piano. But he let me in. And I realised afterwards why he let me in. Because I could read the notes. I hadn't got a great voice. But the guy next to me had a fabulous voice, but wasn't such a good sight reader.
Perfect.
So we made
Yeah.
a good team between us.
Yeah.
And that was where it really began for me.
Yeah.
But still not the Cathedral organist, of course.
No.
But that comes later, I think. So that's my early beginnings.
Yeah,
So,
fantastic.
I mean, they were very different from yours, I think. Simon, what about you?
I don't remember exactly how I started, but I grew up in Bristol, and I got into the choir of St Mary Redcliffe.
Who was running that then?
Garth Benson. Garth
Who
Benson.
had been organ scholar?
Organ scholar at King's and a chorister at St Paul's, so there's a little bit of that we're all connected. And I don't remember having a particularly good voice, but I sang in the Redcliffe choir. It was the start of a very long association of buildings with spires. But I sang in the choir for 6 months, and that wonderful organ we used to sort of go past every day, every Sunday. The organ would be absolutely, and the fact that the organist sat in a pit, that was so exciting, and everyone used to rush around afterwards and watch Garth play. Anyway, Garth did something very magnanimous, something which when I worked in parish churches I would never have done, and that was he said to my dad, I think Simon's quite good, I think he should be in a cathedral choir. Whereas when I ran parish choirs, I was blooming well going to hold on to every boy that I could, you know, anyone that was good. Anyway, so he said, so my dad knew nothing about music at all, my parents weren't musical, but my uncle had been a choral scholar at King's, and my two cousins were in the choir at Westminster Abbey. Ooh. So my dad rang up my uncle and said, Garth Benson said Simon's quite good at singing, what do you think? And he actually said, and I'm not going to mention names at all, but he said, well, no, I don't think you should come to the Abbey because my boys don't like the choir master. I think you should try something else. And Garth Benson happened to have been a chorister at St Paul's. So Garth rang up the very distinguished then organist of St Paul's, Sir John Dykes Bower, and said, I've got this kid, can I bring him up for audition? And so DB, as he was known, he said, yep, you can bring him up. So Garth practiced with me. I remember we did City of God, How Broad, to the Richmond tune, and a couple of other things I can't remember exactly. I went up to London to the old choir school where I met Sir John, and I sang my hymn, and he gave me a couple of oral tests, and he just said to me, right, you're in. And to this day, I think that his judgment was flawed because I did start the following term, and but about a week after he'd taken me on, he announced his retirement. So I think that he realised that his, skills. So I from Redcliffe, I went to St Paul's as a chorister, and really, well, you two guys know better than anybody else about St Paul's. I never looked back. It was the best 5 years I've ever had in my whole life. Partly because there was a lot of sport, which I loved. The headmaster.
Captain of cricket?
I was captain of cricket too. Me and Alistair Cook had the same distinction. His career seemed to go on a bit better than mine. But I was captain for 2 years, actually. And I was head boy as well, which was really nice. And so I had 2 terms of DB, and then I had Christopher Durnley for the rest of my time. It was before Barry, you came along. And I mean, for me at that time, he was absolutely wonderful, and I revered him. And that started my love of Salisbury Cathedral, which was to enter my life many years later. But just
because he'd
been at Salisbury before he came to St Paul's, and he used to talk to us about Salisbury. And actually, when I look back now, I think he probably never wanted to leave Salisbury.
I think that's true.
And years later, when I went to Salisbury, he would tell me these stories about doing the boys' practice in the morning, then he'd go down to the shops, and then he'd do a bit of gardening, and then he'd have a sleep, and then he'd have evensong, whereas I would take the boys' practice straight into a meeting, then another meeting. But that's for another time, really. But so really, that's how I started out, and I came away from St Paul's after 5 years, thinking I don't want to do anything else. This is my calling.
But you haven't talked about your organ playing at all. How did that begin?
Well, actually, now you mention that, I mean, I played the piano, and at school, at St Paul's, we had to play 2 instruments, and we used to have half an hour piano practice or something before school started, and then after evensong, another one. And I played the piano, and I was taught by the assistant organist's wife, who was a very ferocious lady, who used to slap us over the wrist with a ruler if we hadn't practiced our scales. And I learnt the clarinet, but I didn't start playing the organ until I went back to school to Bristol, to QEH, and that's when I started playing the organ, when I was about 14. But my interest in the organ was there because, I used to go up to the organ loft at St Paul's, turn pages, and I was mesmerised by watching all these guys play so brilliantly, and very exciting.
Who taught you the organ then to start with in Bristol?
A chap called Edward Fry at
Yes.
Pembroke Road, that sort of
Pembroke
modern,
Road.
yeah.
Yes, that's right.
And then a chap called at QEH, where I went, a guy called Malcolm.
QEH being
Queen Elizabeth's Hospital. It was one of those blue coat ones. We used to sort of wear those sort of funny yellow socks and long coats, which was fine, you know, having worn chorister uniform. And in fact, when I was a chorister, we used to wear mortarboards and gowns.
Oh, yes.
And actually, I must just very quickly tell you a very amusing anecdote of my time at St Paul's, because we had a very strict headmaster. And on a Sunday, this is hard to believe now, but on a Sunday in those days, the senior boys were allowed to go out in twos for a walk around the city of London. No chaperones or anything. And there was only one rule, and that you weren't allowed to sit down. And we used to wear Eton suits and white collars, and, you know, we looked very smart. Well, me and one of my mates, we discovered this little corner of the cathedral where you could sit in the dark and that sort of thing and just put your feet up. And we were discovered by some American tourists who said that we looked very cute and asked if they could take some photographs, so they did. And, you know, we said thank you very much, and off they went. Little did we know that they thought, well, it's very nice. They were very nice boys. It'd be nice to send them a memento of our photograph. So they sent a photograph of us sitting down to the headmaster. And we got into a lot of trouble. But anyway, that's how I started. What about you, Malcolm?
Well, my parents were both Methodists, so I started life in the Methodist Church in Lytham, St Anne's in Lytham. And I got interested in the organ because the organist there was a guy called Frank Dickinson.
All right.
And his son was Peter Dickinson, the composer.
Yeah, right.
And so Frank Dickinson obviously recognised that I was interested in the organ and used to let me go up and play a hymn after the service each Sunday morning.
After?
Well, not during, yes. No, he used to give me a hymn the previous week, something very straightforward like to God the Prince of Peace, just C major, nice and easy. So I used to practice it and play it the following week, and then he'd say, right, next week try and put the pedals in.
Right.
So he sort of got me going on it. But then I really sort of got into church music a little bit later, because when I went to my local grammar school, it had an organ. And a lot of my friends at school actually sang in the local parish church choir in St Anne's parish church. A guy called Robert Atherton, and his son was David Atherton, the conductor.
Oh yeah.
So, but by that stage, I was too old to be a treble in the choir. I was about 14 at that point. But I saw the light and I became confirmed, and bit by bit got better on the organ, and obviously played the piano already, and then got the assistant organist's job at St John's Church in Lytham, another church with a spire. Those of you who know Lytham will know that there's a white windmill on the green, and St John's Church is the one that's always photographed in the same picture.
Is it? My geography is very poor. Is it on the coast?
It's on the Fylde coast, so it's sort of between.
So give me a clue where that is.
Well, Preston is 12 miles away.
Preston.
Blackpool is.
Now you're
8 miles
talking.
away. Yeah.
Right. So I get it.
That's it.
Yeah.
You didn't sing as a treble, then?
So I didn't sing as a treble. I would love to have done, but
I would love to.
I think growing up in the Methodist Church, there wasn't that opportunity. The nearest cathedral was 30 miles away. That was Blackburn, and that would have been too far to go. They were day choristers anyway. So I never did sing as a treble, although I did have a treble voice, and I can remember singing
at school, though?
at school. Yeah, in the school choir.
And did you practice on this local Methodist Church organ then? How did you do if you had a hymn to take home, how did you practice it? Where did you practice
I just practiced it on the piano at home, actually, and then took it along the following Sunday and tried playing it on the organ.
Well, was that your formal piano grounding? I mean, forgive me asking.
No, I did have piano lessons from the age of 8. So I was having piano lessons with a lovely lady called Marjorie Kay, who was she was a great teacher actually, and she was always more interested in music than technique, which was what I needed at that age actually. She really developed my love of music. So I was having the piano lessons. I suppose I'd got to about grade 5 on the piano.
5 grades more than me.
By the time.
He's well qualified.
But yeah, so
That's
that's how it. I didn't get much further. Yeah, that's how I sort of got going. It was really good having an organ at my grammar school.
Well, the conversation just went on and on, as you might expect when you've got Barry Rose as your guest. But it was quite fascinating, all the things that I learned. Really was. So if you enjoyed listening to our chat, do join us again soon. In our second episode, Malcolm and I are reminiscing on our school days and how we got into the profession in the first place. And Barry has some fascinating insights into early recording. So hopefully, see you soon.